Welcome to Collab Houston. We're a group of youth pastors located in the Houston area, and we're getting together to talk about our years of experience in youth ministry, life, and how to further God's kingdom. Our purpose is to have a dialogue about how to do ministry well in the Asian American, specifically the Chinese community. We also want to have an active dialogue from our community during our sessions, so please feel free to comment during our live stream, and we'll do our best to answer the questions as they come along. Thanks again for joining us. And now, here's Kai, Stanley, Jeremy, and Justin.
One live.
You are?
Okay, setting up. Oh, I think so. Meeting is now streaming on Facebook.
Yes.
Man.
Great. The best intros ever.
We are the worst at this.
No, man.
You know what? It's like we have to find followers on every single platform. So
This is true. I think we're doing this
Anticipate.
intentionally.
yeah, try to anticipate which social media platform we're gonna stream live from next.
Yeah.
Just guess.
We try next.
We're gonna go live on Zanga.
No.
I don't know what that is, man.
All right. Anyways, hey everybody, welcome to this special edition of Collab Houston. I know it's been 2 weeks, but appreciate you guys coming up. It's the four of us again, and we just wanted to talk through some stuff. Stan's gonna actually intro us into kind of our topic tonight. So Stan, what you got for us tonight?
So today's our second session of the Pastors Roundtable. We originally wanted to talk about our ministries during this whole pandemic, COVID time, and but then we got together last night trying to discuss, like, hey, what do we want to actually do? Kind of discuss what is our discussion going to look like, and we felt like we actually needed to change our topic for tonight. And so I know that maybe most of your social media accounts, it's blowing up with the whole George Floyd thing situation. And so we felt like, hey, we can't be silent on this topic. And, even as Asians, I know a lot of us, a lot of my posts, a lot of our friends are posting just like, we can't be silent about this. And I agree with that. We can't be silent about this, but instead of just as Asians, we can't be silent. And what I believe, and I think we all believe this, is that as we can't be silent about this as Christians. And so we felt like we as Christians, as disciples of Jesus Christ, we needed to address this issue. And so, and we really wanted to address this issue for our students and for our ministries, to help encourage our students, to help our, even our families, students and parents, to kind of begin to think about these topics and to begin to think about this issue. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to be thinking about this incident together. We just started talking about this last night together. And so we just kind of want to, just kind of have a conversation about this. And just help each other process through this. And so, we want to see what this means for us as Christians. We want to see, we want to help our students, encourage our parents, and to think about this. And if you haven't done so already, really at the end of all this, I believe that we want to help you guys think through this whole thing biblically. And again, we just want this to be a conversation starter. This isn't the end all to, this is what you need to do. This is, but rather this is the starting point. And hopefully you guys will begin to connect with us on this issue. And so, that's where we're headed today. And I'm gonna hand it back to Justin to let you guys know, what tonight's gonna be like. And so.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think for you guys who are just tuning in, I think the big thing here is, hey, there's a lot of other people talking about this, guys who are way smarter than us, who've already posted like massive articles, and there's already been roundtables and stuff. And I think the difference in the unique thing that we got here is we're a bunch of friends. We would have talked about this anyways, but we're talking about it from a specific angle, and that's typically within a youth ministry world, a Christian world, Asian American world. And so we're just going to talk through it. And so I just want to lead off with I want to hear some of y'all's thoughts. So Kai, why don't you go first? When you were reading through this, right? Even last night when we were talking, what are some initial things that were going through your mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be the first to say, like, I'm not the most up to date in terms of like what happens in this world sometimes. I didn't find out about the incident until like a whole day later, actually. And
Wait, hold on. Kai, how do you get your news? Do you go through? Is it Instagram? Is it through Michelle?
Definitely social media for sure.
Okay.
I mean, just seeing people post different. I mean, I try to follow like a wide variety of people, so it's not just my friends, but just some other networks that post different things. And that's kind of how I found out about it. And definitely, I think like a lot of people, my initial emotion was anger and frustration that it's happened again and so recently too, from the last major incident with Ahmaud Arbery. And so I think that it was definitely a lot of frustration and anger. And then also I think it was interesting because I don't know how many of you guys saw, but I actually went to go watch the video. I watched the video,
like the original one.
The original video,
Okay.
Of the, like we see the man on the ground, we see the officer on top of him, we see also the Asian American man standing in front of the whole scene, and who we later found out he's actually he's Hmong, right? And so it brought a lot of feelings in my mind. Just like, wow, like that's someone who looks like me in the middle of this really bad video, that bad incident. And it made me think about myself as an Asian American and how I view, the kind of role that I play in all of this in terms of thinking about justice and reconciliation. It made me think about our students in youth ministry and, what they're thinking about it. And I think for me, and this is the last thing I'll say, and maybe I'll hand it off to Jeremy or one of you guys, but, for me, I'm reminded that like when I think about myself as a younger, when I was younger and even our students right now who are teenagers, I think about how for a lot of us Asian American teenagers, when we see things like this, we don't have a lot of reaction. And it's not that like we don't care about violence or injustice, but I think it's that there's such a disconnect between what we label as important and priority versus what's out there. I think for many of our students, for all of our churches, right, like we're from the burbs, where they all live in the suburbs, and suburbs is the place to go if you want to be safe and away from drama. And so I think for a lot of us, we're very much kind of on this spectrum on one end where like we're so disconnected from it that it doesn't, like, yeah, we're frustrated, we're mad, and then a few days later we move on and we're disconnected from it. And I think that is actually not healthy. It's not healthy to just move on from it and not think about it too much. We don't want to go on the extreme of reacting so emotionally so far as to, do things like, setting up, looting from different stores, like what we're seeing in Minnesota, or, burning buildings down in Minnesota. But we also don't want to be so passive to not care, not think about it. Because I would argue that that's actually a type of sin to neglect those who are in need. And so we need to be able to encourage our students to like think through it in a healthy way, not necessarily coming up with like, oh, this is the solution, this is the answer, but it's like, let's think about it, right? I think that's the first step that we can take to be not so ignorant, honestly, for lack of a better word. So I think it's an important topic. I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm gonna stop right now.
Yo, man, I think Kai just wrapped the entire the whole thing up, man. I think we're done.
No, let's call it.
So this is gonna be our quickest podcast ever, and so we'll just end it.
Yeah.
I said like, what's your initial reaction, and you went on this.
I had a lot of reaction, dude. I had a lot of thoughts.
That's your first reaction?
I had a lot of thoughts.
like for me, it was like, oh my gosh. And then like, I couldn't process it right away, but like, so I mean, and maybe that's you, right? So, where were you guys? Like, what's your initial thing? So, when you look at it, right, whether on social media, on the news, like the first thing that comes to your mind, and then I guess the question is, how much time do you spend dwelling on that thing immediately? Or is it like what Kai said? You said something about, hey, sometimes we see it, it's another news article, and we keep scrolling. Like for you guys, how much did you, like after the immediate, looking at it, how much did y'all spend on it, or how much were you just like, okay, this is gonna be bigger than it was? Where were y'all at on this?
I mean, I felt like, I mean, I agree with some of the things that Kai had said. He was saying how like there's not a lot of reaction to it, and I feel like that's kind of like where I'm at, to be honest, if I can be honest with y'all, and I'm just, so I've been thinking about like, oh, how much is enough, right? Like when is enough, like when is something gonna happen? Whereas, because I see that from two sides, where I think a lot of us where we are talking about it now, and where a lot of people are crying out for justice to happen, and they're probably we're probably thinking like, how much is, when is it going to happen? When is this going to stop? When is something going to change? And even for myself is, for me to care even more, I'm thinking, and I think that this is kind of starting to push where like, okay, like this is probably the tipping point of like, God's like, hey, you know what? Like you do need to start caring a lot more about this than where you're at right now. And if I can be just totally honest, I think those are just some of the things where God's saying like, yeah, like you guys can't be silent about it. You guys, you have to do more than, what you've been doing in the past. So you got to react a little more. And yeah, so I think that's where I found myself at, just even after this past few days of just kind of thinking like, okay, like, I mean, I don't know if I was just so callous to it. It was like, okay, this is another thing. And then, yeah, you scroll, right? And then you finally think about it until you see like the fifth person posting about it. Yeah. Or even it's just like, all right, how come there's so many people posting about it now? Like, how come all the Asians are posting about it this time, right? Like, and then that like kind of triggered something too this time, where I was like, man, there's so many Asians triggered. Like, was this a tipping point? But yeah, I think for me though, I was just like, I'm actually kind of glad that there's some sort of, I think Kai said this earlier, like at least there are more and more conversations happening, especially with Asians right now.
But before we get to Jeremy, this is for all of you guys, right? I guess when you look at articles like this, right? And again, this is a unique case, is why we're talking about it. But when you see things like this or some kind of like really big headline, are there certain sources that you try to go towards first? Are there certain people that you're trying to figure out their reaction? Or are you completely kind of independent? Hey, I'm going to make up my own mind without being colored by other people? Because I think for me, right, I always want to read it. And then there are certain people in my feeds or that I follow that I'm like, okay, I want to see how they're thinking through it, because they're my mentors. Right. I have and maybe we could talk about this later, but I have my personal opinions, but sometimes I know that, I may be thinking about it too quickly, not thinking it quick enough. And I always want to do, to kind of check myself with some other people. Do y'all do that? Or is that just me? Like try to get affirmation, like you're not crazy or you're thinking about this the right way or whatever. I mean, do you guys do that? Or do y'all have people that y'all go to?
I think what I do is I go on Instagram and I type in JUSTINW.
Yeah, right.
And I see what he says. Like, what does Dr. Reverend Justin Wong say?
Justin Holcomb, yeah, Justin Bieber or Justin Timberlake.
I don't have like a particular news source I always go to. I definitely just kind of browse everything, and I think for me there is a good. I think for me it's like I try to get as much facts, like not reading about opinions, even though they're everywhere, but trying to get as much as factual information as possible. And then for me and myself, hopefully by the grace of God, I try to develop kind of my own train of thoughts and processing of like, what has happened and what is the injustice that has happened and what are the repercussions and all that stuff. So I kind of do a little bit of getting factual information, even though I can't avoid reading the opinions. And then I also try to think through it through my own lenses, especially in light of like, what does Christ teach me about how I am to think, and then thinking through that.
Do you guys go through comments immediately, or do you wait for later to read comments? Like, I mean, not just on this issue, but like on any kind of topic or debate. Do you just let it go, or do you read the comments to see where the conversation's going?
I mean, I barely. If you talk to my wife, she'll be like, "You never read comments." And
is that because you don't want to? Because you just you don't like it.
I think especially when I read things that trigger me, those are usually found in the comment section. And I think for myself, just processing through all of this, whenever something that is this traumatic and this huge, I try to, like, for me personally, I try to find as many facts. My wife tends to be on Twitter more, so she's able to, like, Twitter is like your news sources. Like Instagram, you kind of have to sort through the influencers and stuff like that, but Twitter, you can really get down to the nitty gritty. Because people have to be concise on Twitter, right? And on Instagram, people can be very long-winded. And so, yeah, I think, I try to find facts, but when you have to I try not to go through social media to find facts. I feel like, even though news sources like CNN or whatever, they still have opinion in them. I think I try to really, go to those sources first rather than like when, and this sucks to bring this up, but like when Kobe died, I went to CNN to see if they reported anything first. And stuff like that. So that tends to be my tendency. But the other thing is, my initial reaction to this, it's like I go into a sense of despair. Like I read this and I'm like, God, this is like so messed up. And then my reaction is, well, like I then begin this internal struggle of like, man, I really want to post something, but at the same time, I'm pretty, if you follow any of my social media stuff, I don't post a lot in general. I'm not very public. I just kind of I don't feel like I need that kind of attention. And at the same time, I always like internally wonder, like, is posting something that like this, is it really helpful at the end of the day? And it might, because we have a lot of students who follow us, but at the same time, like, this is a systemic problem, and for us to just even think about, what are the ramifications for us to do these things, to talk about these things, to post about these things. And I think that's why I would rather have a conversation like with you guys, like when we think about these things, like what are we supposed to be teaching our students during this time? Like how are we supposed to react? If we blow up and have this emotional response, which a lot of people do. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to have an emotional response, but as pastors and as shepherders, we're supposed to guide our young people to be more Christ-like. And so, what is going to be, I think, most beneficial is something like this, where let's talk about it, let's sit down, let's figure this out. Yeah, so those are just kind of my initial reactions. I don't want to go too on it. So
no, I mean, and obviously we're definitely gonna go through a couple more categories, especially the bucket of being Asian and then the bucket of working students do this. But I think both you and Kai brought something up that's, and Stan, you brought this up too. That's gonna be crucial. And I think if there's any advice that we can give on this initial section is the value and the prudence of realizing what the facts are. Right before we react to anything, it's giving the benefit of the doubt to all the sources and these type of things, so that we're at least informed. Right. I'm not saying that it's wrong or it's not right or whatever, but it's just, hey, you got to be able to hear the facts, let it be reported, and sometimes that takes longer than just 30 minutes or for an hour and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And so if we can give advice to students right now, it's just, hey, like, source your stuff. It's not wrong to do that. And then there has to be some kind of wisdom as far as, hey, what's the benefit of posting immediately? Because I think that's what we saw, right? We saw a ton of things, and there was reaction. I mean, there's some really heated reactions that, you know, coming from all sides of going, hey, if you don't post immediately, you don't care, or hey, like, hey, how come you're not posting? And I think especially in our arena, right, where we have a little bit of a bigger platform where we're trying to shepherd students. You know, there's consequences to this, and so you guys bring this up. But here's the thing, right? I think after seeing the facts, after realizing the facts, we can absolutely say, hey, there was definitely injustice that happened. There was absolutely uncalled for, and there needs to be some kind of response. And I think it's right, it's good. And this is the reason why we're doing this, just to be like, hey, that was wrong, you know, and that there should be things attached to it. But I think this is where we could move past it, because I think we would just agree with a lot of people out there in how to assess the situation. But I think right now we have to talk through the realm of the Asian aspect to it, right? And Stan, Kai, you brought this up, right? Just of the cop. What's the reaction, right? I mean, honestly, when I saw the video, my first thought wasn't to go to the Asian, right? It was focused on the actual action, right, of the officer and George on the floor, and that's where my attention was, because that's where the camera was pointing. And then it panned out, and then you see the other officers, and then you see the shot of the Asian officer, right? And so, what happens, right? What happens in that situation? Because now you have a whole nother element of, okay, now how do we respond to this as Asian Americans and as Christians? So I guess Asian American first, and then as Christians. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, how big of a deal is it for us that there was an Asian American in this context? Because like we talked, like I mentioned it, like a month ago, it was Ahmaud Arbery, right? One black guy, you know, two or three, like two white guys, one guy filming, you know, like, is it because that there is an Asian American there now suddenly we care, or is it, you know, like from the start, like is our responses going to be similar, or is it, yeah? So I think that's kind of also the question.
Well, I mean, Stan brought that up too, right? It's just like, hey, what you said something about, how come, where was this earlier? And why did it change just because there was an Asian guy there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Yeah, because I did mention how on my Facebook post, I saw a lot more Asians responding this time than in the past. So I just thought that was interesting. But I thought that was a good thing, where it triggers us to think more about this. You know, where it is where we, you know, what is our role in this? How do we fit in with this, right? Do we have a place in this? Should we talk about this? And I know some of the things that made me start thinking, like, okay, yeah, we do need to start talking about this, and it, because I guess for the most part, it's always been like, I always felt like we were kind of outside, but then now it's like, wait, no, this is not part of us. And I don't know if I can skip ahead, but even for us as Christians, like we're not outside of this. We're like, if anything, we need to be right in the middle of this, advocating for anything and everything, you know, that's going on. And so, yeah, I just thought it was interesting about that part.
I mean, I mean, like, you know, I'll confess right now that, like, compared to the other incidents that we've seen years past, and this one where there was an Asian man front and center, like, this was the first time where, as I read, heard, and saw what was happening, I felt like something was stabbing my heart. And I personally felt like, oh my gosh, like, I feel more emotionally connected with this story than any of the other ones. And I think that kind of shows, and I'm willing to bet that I'm not the only one out there who because of this Asian man as an Asian American, we feel more connected. I'm not the only one. I'm willing to bet. And I think that kind of shows the hypocrisy in my heart and our hearts that like, maybe like, do we, like how much do we actually care about those other stories of this black and white man, right? Do we really care that much? Or, it's just kind of like we feel them, but that's their stuff, none of our business. I'll be honest. Like, I feel like for me, seeing this Asian man has actually made me realize that I honestly probably did not care as much as I should have, which led to my lack of response in all the past incidents. And so for me, I felt like seeing the Hmong police officer, and actually even reading more about him and reading about his past, there's not the best things there. It really struck a chord for me, and like, what would I do? Like, what if I was him? Would I react any differently, or what should I be doing now in the midst of this injustice that I feel more strongly about than ever before? So it struck a chord with me. I'll just be honest.
Okay, let me throw in a bomb into this conversation, because like, look, I mean, I think we all see it. I think we feel it, right? Man, but like, I guess my question is, are we putting too much blame on this officer, right? And as the representative Asian that generalizes all of the Asian race, right? Because I'm reading this. I also, like you, right? I'm going, hey, he kind of looks like me. He's there. Is this me, right? Am I passive? But on the other side, I'm just like, hey, are we trying to put our entire identity as a race in this man and saying, look, he was passive, he didn't do his job, he didn't stand for injustice, therefore the rest of us are like that? It's a hard balance, because I'm just going, the pendulum is one or the other. I just, and I'm not saying he didn't have, I think he's absolutely responsible, right? He should have done the right thing. But on the other side, I'm just like, are we really doing this where we're trying to put the entire race of the Asian people on him? Like, is that fair? What do you think?
I think he's a type. You know how like we're talking like all of the articles that I've read about, like this is like, if you were to draw a line down the center, this is usually the action of the Asian population of passive, like non-confrontational. I mean, he's doing his job in the sense that he's having the back of his fellow police officers. Like, he's quote unquote doing his job, right? But at the same time, for us, and I come from a very a different, I guess, perspective than Kai. I did not care that he was Asian American. I felt like as a human being, he should have known. Like, as a human, like, you gotta know that, like, if you look, like, even in like the most violent sport like MMA, like you can't do that kind of thing to a person in a violent sport, and for anybody with any sort of sense to take even an objective look at what's going on, my reaction is like, like, for me, I personally, I go to anger like that. I go to
anger on him and his lack of doing something, or the situation that happened.
Yes, like all of it. Like, I'm angry at the police officer for standing there. I'm angry at the police officer for kneeling on George's neck. I'm angry at the system. I'm angry at God, because all of these things are happening. Our world is like, the more we see it, the more broken. And the thing is, like, I agree. Like, growing up in the burbs, like, for us, we don't really see this. And I keep seeing this quote that apparently Will Smith. I'm saying apparently because other people are quoting Will Smith. Like, it's not that racism is more.
It's just people are filming it.
Yeah, it's just people are filming it. Like, we are now more aware, and that's, I think, the whole idea for an Asian American to stand as, like, I think, yeah, in the sense that of what you were just talking about, I don't put all of our eggs on our eggs in his basket, because I think we know plenty of Asian Americans who do stand up for justice, who speak out, and I think that even for us to even be able to talk about this, and I think that there are people in our churches, there are people, who definitely speak out on these things, and and so I think like as I for me, the only race that mattered was that there was a black man on the floor getting killed. And it was just like, my problem then goes to, or my head goes to, like, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to change things? And then, like what I was saying earlier, like it just goes to despair, because at what point are we going to actually see some change? And so, and I think this comes back to our question of now what,
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that, and even just kind of follow up with that, your thought of like, what now, right? The question is, I'm just thinking like, what is our response now? Like, even to our students that we want to talk to, like when we go back on, I don't know when you guys are meeting next, right? I mean, maybe it's tomorrow or next week, like, what do you guys want with your students? Like, do you want them to like start making posts? And I'm starting to think about this, like I think for me, it kind of tying back to Justin's question of like, do we put, our eggs in this basket with this Asian cop? Is he all there? But if anything, I might sound like a broken record, but I feel like, I think the next steps is really just questioning what's in our hearts right now. And that's what's going on with me. It's just like, man, like, what is my reaction? Where am I, where should I be challenged in this? And what is God wanting us to think and feel about these things? And and I think next steps, it's got to be small. I feel like it has to be small in terms of, like it's going to start with you, start with you guys, and start with me, start with just smaller conversations with our students, just seeing how they're feeling and aligning their hearts to really God's heart for these situations. And I don't know if I can just ask you guys, and like as believers, as followers of Jesus Christ, like if I know a lot of people might be like, how does God see this? Like, what do you think? How would God view this situation? I mean, how would y'all kind of ask that? Because I can see like, if we want to align our hearts to God with God's heart, I mean, what would you say if your students had asked you that?
I mean, I think the first thing I think if you're going to be biblically consistent, right, you have to recognize that there is injustice, right? That we are called as Christians to not only love God but love neighbor, and that's to take care of them where they're at, right? And whether they are a believer or a non-believer, it is the role of someone who has experienced grace to always give grace to these people, right? And so I think a lot of times it's absolutely right. I think there has to be this it's not just doing things for people, right? But having a heart and compassion for their soul, the fact that they are also made in the image of God. I think you have to always understand that, hey, a human is a human, right? And what Jeremy said was right. It's whether he was, whatever color, right? At this point, you should love him because he's made in God's image. Now, I would say that doesn't disqualify or discredit the immense injustice that's done to a particular race. I think that's absolutely there. I think as Asians, it's a little harder, right, to identify with. And I think this is where it gets really tricky, right? Where, either we want to perfectly identify or to completely back up this another race. And I'm just like, hey, we're just not that race. And I think that's okay, I mean, I think every race has their own struggles, and I'm not saying it's better or worse than other ones, but I think what we see is on a lot of this is matching up with the right side of history. Hey, being on part of, hey, I want to make sure that I say the right thing at the right time, and I want to make sure that I'm on this right side of history on this one. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just how do we go about it as Christians too, who also believe in grace and mercy, but we believe in justice and righteousness, right? Like you can't take one doctrine at the expense of another doctrine. And like, honestly, this is hard because I think timing is one thing, right? Because you shouldn't sit silently. But then again, you're also dealing with, injustice happened to Jesus as well, which is not an excuse to not do something here, but we also have to realize, hey, our entire religion, is based off of the fact that an innocent man was nailed to a cross for the sins of the world, And so, just saying that I know is going to infuriate people because they're like, well, that's not enough. You still got to do stuff to it. And I'm just like, I get it. We're trying to process this too. Right. And so, that's kind of where I'm there.
Can I ask, so, I'm trying to think about, our context working with teenagers. Like, what would you guys say to a youth, one of yours that came up to you and just said, like, I see what's going on, but I have a hard time, emotionally, relating and connecting to what's going on. Like, I'm not Black, I'm Asian, I live in the suburbs. How would you guide and counsel this young man or young woman in understanding and capturing, everything fully of what's going on?
Well, I think the initial thing is, I think you want to encourage that, right? I mean, just the fact that they are asking this question, that's already a good start, because we talked about this, right? There's a whole bunch of people, our students, ourselves included, where we read headlines and either we're too jaded or we just don't care because it's not funny or it's not entertaining. And so we're just going to scroll. And I think that's the issue with Instagram culture, right? We're a scrolling through lives generation. So I'd say, hey man, let's at least celebrate the fact that, hey, keep questioning. Let's walk through this together. So at least that's the first step, but that doesn't answer your question. So I'm going to let Stan answer that question.
Sure. I think I just had a thought, but I think if I were to answer one of the students, I would go, what does your heart break for right now, right? And I ask that because I feel like one of the big things in our life is that kindness and compassion should rule in our hearts, and not just, and this should go throughout all situations, right? This should be, if you look at the world, there's so much stuff that is going on, and your heart should break when you look at the world and you go, yeah, there's a lot of messed up stuff. There's a lot of evil. There's a lot of dark stuff that is happening, and these things should be affecting you, right? And I'll say this, right? I'll put an example like this. I think when we hear about other people's dying, maybe this is someone else's parent dies, we go, oh yeah, that's sad, but we don't really feel that, right? You're like, okay, oh, sorry for your loss and this and that. But when that actually happens to you, you start to you actually feel that darkness. You feel that pain, you feel that sorrow. And so here's the thing with us as believers in Christ and as Christians, I feel like we have the evil in the world is not something that's out there, but rather it's here, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. And there's a lot of brokenness in the world. And, I was looking at the comments, I know, and then, Jody says, yeah, the racism is sure, but there's also alarming culture issues on display that warrant discussion, police culture, power, and authority culture. She points out, there's so much more that's going on that we need to discuss. And unfortunately, we can't discuss all of that. But at the same time, the point is she makes a good point. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. There's a lot of brokenness. And I would encourage them to go there. Okay, if you don't see brokenness here, but how about other places? Like we can't, like, and yeah, Justin says we're just a scrolling, whatever Instagram culture. Like if the phone's in our faces and we don't see what's actually going on, then how are we going to be like, why would it even matter if we're salt of the earth? Like it doesn't matter. Like, if we don't see the moral decay, we won't care about being salt of the earth.
And Stan, I think that's the point, right? I think the question that the four of us are trying to figure out is, how do we make kids care, right? Or how do we get not just students, but anybody? How do we get people to, like, not just mentally understand, right, the history of systemic racism, history of injustice, but how do we at the heart level get people to care? And I think that is the $1 million question. How do you change a heart, right? How do you get a heart that does not care, that cares about self at times, and maybe care about other little things here and there, but how do you get them to care? And again, let's extrapolate this to a bazillion things, right? Care about injustice, care about the homeless, all of these types of things. And I'm not putting them on the same level, right? But it's the $1 million question is, how do you get someone's heart to change the care, right?
Maybe it's got to be one of our, part of our ministries. Like we got to go and do more like justice stuff, right? And like you said, like for us, HCC, we're right at 610 in Maine. There's a bunch of homeless like who just are there under that bridge, right? Like that has to. I know HCC has started some ministries there, but I mean, as a youth ministry, maybe we got to do a bigger push for that, right? Like. Yeah, we have to get. I feel like we have to be more involved with it and be more engaged with it, in order, because it has to. We have to see it that it is like right here, part of our lives.
All right.
Yeah, I think one of the.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think one of the main techniques that I've seen is when you put somebody's name, you know someone. To answer Kai's question, like I would say, like if you have an African American friend, go find one. There are plenty at your school. Go ask them what it's like. They are taking certain precautions that we would never, ever even consider.
Yeah.
We would never even think about those precautions. African American parents teaching their kids certain things, to do certain things a certain way, so that they can you grow up like doing certain things. I don't have an example off the top of my head, but I've heard of them before. And then when you are able to put a name to this situation, like someone that you know personally, I mean, that changes things completely. You're talking about homeless, like going to someone that in the homeless population, getting to know who that person is, hearing their story, hearing about why they've become homeless, like hearing what has happened in their lives, that how did they end up here, and I think that one of the first things that we can do is really encourage, like when your kids come talk to, like when my kids come talk to me, they look like me, black hair, eyes, high cheekbones, whatever, we all look the same. Now go talk to someone who doesn't look like you. I think that for me, that would be the first thing that I would encourage my students to do.
Man, I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of time, and I wonder how many Asian American youth ministries, it's so hard for us to talk about race because all we do is youth ministry with Asian Americans, right? We stay inside of our own little bubbles, and it's hard because it's like, hey, I got school, but my real people are within my Asian American stuff. I wonder how many times can we actually force the situation to where we could start partnering with other ethnic churches, right? Or, more multicultural type of things. And, I would say for you Asian American youth pastors out there, right? This may be the next hurdle to go through. Just go, hey, how can I be intentional about joining other youth ministries or other ministries that are not normal for us? And to hear a story, right, to hear the conversation is the front door, right? Because a lot of times we don't care about what they're going through, what they're feeling, like what you said, right? We don't know how they prep, what the moms are thinking. these type of things, and it's so foreign to our culture. And so I think the huge thing is absolutely listening through it. I'll name drop Dr. Eric Mason, right? He wrote a book called Woke Church, and I think one of his steps of trying to engage this conversation is learning the humanity of the other person, and it's just by listening to them. But man, we're like running out of time here.
Let me say something real quick. Like, yeah, I agree with you guys, Justin. What you just said, I agree. Like, you know, I mean, we have to be, like, we cannot always just be with people who look just like us. Like, we got to be out there with people who don't look like us, listening and learning about their stories. Doesn't mean that we need to be best friends with them and hang out with them every single day. It doesn't mean that, but it does mean that, like, if you're only with people who look like you, then you're not gonna be able to relate. And if you want to connect deeply with the injustices of the world, you have to be able to go outside of people who look like you. You know, I really like this. I came across an article that like one of you guys shared, and I want to just read it because I feel like it resonated really well with me. It's from a guy named Daniel Hill, in his book. It's called Wide Awake. And there's a definition by Reverend Julian DeShizer, and he defines privilege as the ability to walk away. And I think a lot of times, like, you know, for Asian Americans, like we see the injustice happening to our African American brothers, and we're like we don't connect with this so deeply because we're like, yeah, like, it has nothing to do with me. I don't look like that. I don't understand the poverty of the situation. Nothing to do with us. And so we disconnect pretty quickly. But, like, you know, with this quote, like, I'm reminded that, like, if I have the ability to walk away, then I can relate to the white people who are, you know, like in this incident with George, like the oppressor, right? Whatever. You know, he says, you know, and I'm reading this blog, like, he says, like, I am the Asian man in the video. I have the ability, and I still do have the ability to look away. I have the ability to walk away. I have the ability to go through my life and never fear that this sort of abuse and violence will happen to me or my children. I can walk away. And he ends his article by saying, but I'm trying not to. And I feel like that's what I would want to encourage our students and anyone listening, that, like, if you are someone who you have the ability to walk away, then you have privilege. I have privilege. And the best thing we can do is to not walk away, but to actually walk into it. Not saying that we need to go and protest, not saying that at all. Even though there are times and places where responsible, respectable protest is good and it's fine. But, like, I think purely to have these dialogue and conversations, that is the process of walking into it. I think that's a good first step for a lot of people. And I'm, you know, I'll end my part with this. Like, I'm reminded of Christ. I'm reminded, you know, I think everything we talk about, like, we should try to view it through the lenses of the gospel. And I think about Jesus. I think about how, you know, when he was moments away from being arrested and eventually crucified, like, he was praying. He was praying in the garden, and he was praying, Lord, if you would take this cup away from me, right? If you would let me not have to do this. Jesus totally could have just said, I don't want to do this. He totally could have sent angels down to rescue him from the cross. He could walk away, but yet he chose not to. He went into it. He suffered for our sake, for our freedom and our redemption. And so, like, that, I think for me was really powerful to see that, like, I am privileged, and, like, just like how Christ had the power, he didn't use that power, but instead he went into, you know, the deep stuff, and he suffered for it. I don't even know where I was going, but for me, I think
it sounded really good, man.
Sounded really good.
Like, so
well, wait, before
in the beginning.
before you move on, before I let you end, what is one or two talking points that you want your students to get out of this? Or we can come back to you.
Oh, is that for me?
Yeah, for you.
I want my students I want my students first to see that like this is not apart from their world. Like they live in this world filled with injustice, and it is irresponsible and selfish of us to not at least do research and learn and to have conversations to at least educate ourselves and to empathize. I'm not saying that every kid needs to go and be a lawyer and go fight for the justices. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that like, man, we gotta be thinking. We cannot just scroll through like what you're saying and just say like, oh, that's sad. Let me repost this and then move on. But we gotta like, we have to think about it. We have to learn about it. And I encourage it. We gotta have conversations about it. I'm not saying that we need to be obsessed about it, but like we gotta engage. We have to engage. We cannot just do nothing and think nothing and scroll through.
Okay, Jeremy, what are your closing couple thoughts that you want to say to your students?
Yeah, I would really just point to the heart issue. So in this case, and just thinking about like, you know, like when we were talking last night, I was just saying, like, you know, there's been no school shootings in 2020, and that's, I mean, a completely different issue. But our students are like just hearing like, oh great, there's another school shooting. Oh great, there's another, you know, African American who's being killed. You know, oh great, there's, you know, and that desensitized,
yeah, we got
heart you. Is like, you know, the scripture teaches us, you know, I've given, you know, like when I've given them a new heart, you know, a beating heart, a live heart, you know, and if our hearts are alive and if we're following Christ and we're saying, you know, like, hey, we're followers of Jesus, at the same time, our hearts are hardened to the things of this world. I really want us to, my students, to really think about like, what are the things that you really care about? And one of the hardest things, especially I think for my students, is thinking big picture. You know, like we're so focused on grades and academics and what's right in front of us. It's really hard to care for, you know, like, you know, as scripture teaches, to love God and love others, you know, and it's, yeah, they can say I love God, but part of that is including loving other people, and including loving other people is having a heart that actually, like what Kai was saying, to be able to be empathetic, to care, to be concerned, to not just be worried about, oh, you know, like I just want to play video games all day. That's all I want to do.
Thinking outside themselves.
Yeah, like to check your heart. Where is your heart, and what is it doing at this moment?
Yeah,
you know,
it's good.
That's what I would want my students to do.
Stan, how about you?
I was gonna before you guys asked, I was gonna be like, Justin, you go first, and I'll say whatever y'all.
Nah, man, no. Okay, I'm gonna close this thing.
No, but really, whatever Jeremy said, I think he kind of wrapped up all of my thoughts. Just the things that, yeah, my hope is that our hearts would break, a lot more, even if it is just a little bit. Like there has to be some response, like because we started our conversation of saying like there was not a lot of response, or you know, what was our first reaction, and it was just like yeah, we scroll past it, and yeah, I think there needs to be some heart checks that needs to happen within us, and I really feel like there has to be movements towards our hearts breaking for whatever that's broken, for everything that's broken, like every life that's suffering, every person out there that's going, that everything that's going on. No, we can't sit idly by anymore. You know, in whether it be racism, whether it be a broken system, whether it be you know, just the homelessness, whether it be just the hungry person, you know, the country that has no food, like, you know, like anything and everything. I feel like our hearts need to break for everything that's happening, for the sin in the world. You know, again, going off talking about being salt and light, and you know, like there's no point in exposing the darkness and not doing anything about it. You know, we see the darkness, and if we expose it, and then that's it. You know, like there's no redemption, no reconciliation, no restoration. that I don't, there's no point in being a light if we don't chase after those things. So
yeah. And how we do that, it's going to be different, right? I mean, it's going to be different for multiple people.
So the question then is like, what is doing at this point for us?
Or not just that, but it's what is doing for students, right? Because I mean, we're trying to walk students, and again, we're talking about like 11-year-olds, right? 6th graders. How and on one side, you're just going, well, how does a 6th grader wade into this, right? Are we trying to hold the expectation of a 6th grader to that of a 25-year-old, to that of a 40-year-old?
So
right?
how about next week in your youth groups, you continue this discussion?
I mean, but like and I think this is where, and if I can add in my thing, right? This is where I would beg everybody out there, and especially the Christians, right? Give grace and time for people to process, right? Give them grace and time to think through this. Let them walk through this, and don't just blast people if they say one thing that's off immediately. You know what I mean? Like, just give them the same grace, because look, maybe we're not as smart as you, right? You bloggers, or you know, activists or whatever, right? Maybe it takes me personally a week to process this and not a day, you know? And so I'm just like, hey, at least afford me the grace and realize that my brain is slower than yours. So let me work through this, because I'm still trying to figure. It's not that I don't care about injustice. It's not that I don't care about other people. It's just, it takes me way longer to think and process through this. And I'm trying to figure out what is the best thing that I can do with where I'm at in this situation. And so I'm just going like, hey, not everyone needs to be the push the panic button immediately, you know, because I think there's some really people that are struggling to figure out, hey, how do I do this well, right? And I think there's churches that are trying to figure this out. And just because they're a little bit slow to the game doesn't mean they're doing this. Now, on the other side, I'm going, you know, you can process for too long, and that gets into Stan's point. And I'm just like, look, you're just all talk, right? You can blog all day, you can post social media posts all day, but if you're not praying for people, right? If you're not, you know, actively trying to figure out how do we play a part in this, then, you know, it's forget your words, you know, like your words don't amount to anything because there's no action that follows it. And so, but then, yeah, go ahead, Kai.
No, Justin, you finish.
And I think someone said this at the very beginning, right? At the end of the day, and I'm not saying we don't do as much as we can to change, because we just literally all said we have to do that. But at the end of the day, we believe that the ultimate justice has to come from a God who knows all of this injustice. And here's the thing. I think he cares and loves people more than we do, right? He cares about the broken. He cares about saving people. He cares about his creation. Even the ones that rebel against him, he cares about them, and justice will be served at some point in time. And for the Christian, we know that the greatest gift was the gift of Christ, that fact that we were saved when we didn't deserve it. Right. And I think that's the ultimate solution. So, I mean, I know I set us up with how do you change a heart? And at the end, we can't make people care about things that they don't want to care about. It has to be a changed heart that sees not just people as worthy, but a changed heart that God has to give them. And I think that's where everything starts. Because I mean, you can do good things in society, but if the ultimate purpose is still selfish, or it's not bringing people to the ultimate reality of who God is, then it's tough. Kai, are you saying something?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we're kind of ending our time here, like, I know that we haven't really been the most like practical in terms of like, oh, as a 6th grader, like, what can you do? You know, and I hope that maybe between the 4 of us and any other youth pastors out there who are listening, like, I hope that maybe, you know, you guys and we can be, you know, leaders in our community, in our churches, to at least initiate some conversations with certain students or a small group. But I just want to ask one last question to all of y'all, you know, in terms of like quick answer for a young person growing in the faith to dive into this area of learning about God's heart for not only the lost, but also those who are oppressed. For a young person to go out and talk to people that, that doesn't look like him or her. Like, is this going to be beneficial for their faith in God and for their growth, for their understanding of their love for Jesus? Like, is this going to be helpful in their faith?
Well, of course. I would say easy yes, right? I mean, because it's just meeting your neighbor, right? You can't care for them. You can't even know their needs if you don't know who they are. Right. And I think it's a simultaneous get off of yourself type of thing. Stop just worrying about yourself and then worry about other people, but then also learn their story. Where are they at? Right. Like, it's just, how do I care for them if I don't even know who they are? So that's an easy yes for me.
Yeah, I think for us, I would say yes too. Pastor Sam is doing his doctorate of ministry, and one of the things that he told us in his research is young people are often, it's really, really difficult for them to be able to consider or to even begin to think of others first. And so part of our jobs as youth pastors is to help them navigate that. Like, how do we consider others before ourselves? How do we put others' needs in front of our own? And whether it's, exposure through the mission field, or taking them to doing service projects in the Third Ward, or whatever it is, our job is to help them kind of navigate, giving them like a few steps here and there. I mean, will some of it stick? Hopefully, hopefully it'll stick. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately it will benefit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Daniel, what about you?
Y'all both said yes, so.
Oh yeah, I just kind of jump in.
No, but yes. In terms of from what I'm thinking is it benefits you because it benefits in this way, or it challenges you to grow in this way. Whereas, like, I guess especially in the Chinese context, where we're so set on, hey, my Christianity is about I got to look good, I got to do what's right, what's wrong. Oh, you're doing this wrong, huh?
Like for myself.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I better look right, I better look good, and that's all our Christianity is about. It's never about actually loving people, loving God and loving others, as Jeremy said earlier. But, and that's what I feel like that's, if we look at Scripture, and that's what Scripture says, like, love God, love people. But then, we're always so set on what do I look like, and that's just what my Christianity ends up being only about. And so definitely turning away from ourselves, like you guys have mentioned. So,
yeah, my answer is also yes, for sure. It's beneficial. We got to remember that, like, salvation is not, like, justice is not going to equal salvation. In terms of justice in this world's definition, like, what brings salvation is the gospel. And we got to always remember the gospel and the love of God. But we also can't we can't just do nothing. We can't not engage, but part of being engaged is, like what you guys have shared, is loving people and obeying God's commands. So we probably got to wrap it up, right?
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to give you too much. And I think the key is, we're just wading into this conversation, right? I think we also have to recognize our limitations on this one too, as working with students and where they're at, and giving them space to not only understand, but to care and to grow. And so this is just again, four guys who have the burden and the privilege of walking with students and their families through this topic in a very unique position that's within the ethnic specific church. And so if you guys have questions later on, go ahead and leave them in the chat boxes and stuff. But yeah, we want to thank you guys for jumping in on this. Again, we're not the definitive answers. This is just we're literally just trying to talk through our own thoughts. I mean, we're still processing this ourselves, and we're trying to remind ourselves. It really is, right? Like,
but we would love to start conversations though, right? Like come talk to us after, message us, and it's just a conversation starter. So we would love to continue to walk with everyone.
Yeah. So I think in 2 weeks we'll jump back on, and we'll talk about more stuff, man.
Are we gonna be on YouTube or Facebook?
Who knows?
Who knows, man? We might be on
next time.
That's right. So
we're sorry.
Keep you on your toes, guys. Yeah, we're sorry.
All right.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Good night,
We will
everyone.
see you guys later.
I don't know how to end this.